Fair is the first line of natural care products to hydrate skin, soften hair, and eradicate ingrowns from head to toe.
Whether you think the bush is back or skin is in, Fur provides beautiful, effective skincare and hair care for up top, down there, and everywhere in between.
That's great, because first goal is to eradicate the stigma around pubic hair, which is something we can get behind.
Absolutely.
And to usher in a new era of body care.
If you're interested in trying Fur products, check out their website, furu.com, and get 15% off with code PERSIST15.
She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted.
Hello and welcome to The Persistence. This is She Who Persisted, the Nasty Podcast. My name, unsurprisingly, is Beatrice.
And I am, as always, Elizabeth.
We still have the same names. Nothing changed.
What is changing, however, is there are two things about this episode that are, or one thing about this episode and one thing about the podcast generally that we want to mention.
Yeah.
So this podcast is being sponsored. And so you will hear ads read by us throughout the episode at the beginning, the middle, and the end. Don't be surprised. It is a thematic sponsor, so it goes right along with what we're talking about in the episode.
Yeah. But we hope to have more sponsors in the future. So this is something that will happen again in this podcast, that you'll hear ads, which is something very common in podcasts. You hear it in other podcasts too. So
yeah, and we have ads at the end of our podcast, that are put through by our podcast host. But right now, these are sponsors who we have reached out to, they have reached out to us, and we are getting money to sponsor their product.
Which is good for us because that way we can keep the podcast free.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is also good for you.
Yeah, so that's number one. Number two is, as I mentioned in our previous episode, we will be taking a break because everybody needs a break in their lives. And we'll be taking a break in January and February, returning in March for Women's History Month. And we'll be slightly changing the format of the podcast as well and having kind of more thematic season approach, maybe. I think that's what we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Because we found that we do very research-heavy episodes.
Yes.
And it's easier to do series and seasons, which is something that we noticed in our menstruation series, than just to do one episode on one topic and then completely change the topic and do something else 2 weeks later.
And the episodes will be a little bit shorter, so they'll be not bite-sized per se, but commute length maybe. And we'll be able to, over the course of a season, really delve deep into a specific topic.
And the reason why they're going to be shorter is also that people told us that our episodes are just too long.
We don't think they're too long. And I know a lot of you don't think they're too long, but some people think they're too long.
Yeah,
so now you get the same content, but spread out over many, many episodes.
Yeah, which makes it easier to listen to.
Yeah. So anyway.
All right. So as I already mentioned, we already talked about the stigma and taboo surrounding menstruation.
A lot.
We talked about this a lot in like 500 episodes. And there is at least one other thing about female bodies that is stigmatized, I would say almost to the same extent as menstruation, at least at this point in time, at this cultural moment, and that's body hair.
Yes, I would agree.
And there are also several parallels between the way that menstruation is stigmatized and body hair is stigmatized. And one of the first things that came to my mind when I thought about this was ads for menstrual hygiene products and ads for razors, because ads about menstrual hygiene products, and we talked about this, never actually show blood.
No, you have that blue fluid that like pours into like the pad, or for tampons, I think they just put it in, maybe they put it in like a blue fluid there as well, but it's not blood.
Yeah, and actually before this episode, Liz and I already talked about this, and I said maybe that's because all women are royals and they just have blue blood.
Yes, that is entirely possible. The only women you see in menstrual product ads are royalty.
Exactly. Only royalty is allowed to participate in menstrual hygiene product ads.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a fact.
Yes.
Write that down. Okay, but the parallel to body hair is that in ads for razors or other hair removal products, you never actually see hair.
No.
What you get is hairless legs being shaved, which is completely pointless.
Yeah, exactly. You see men, going from either having a full beard or, stubble to being clean shaven. But women are already hairless, so they don't need the products that they are advertising.
And one wonders about that advertising strategy because it actually makes sense in an ad to show what the product is actually doing.
Yeah, but lady hair is gross. So nobody wants
to see that.
So you can't show it.
Exactly. So today we'll talk about the norm of hairlessness and the stigma surrounding body hair. We'll talk about cultural differences, at least for a bit, between the US and Austria, because that's the two countries that we're from. We'll talk about personal experiences. We will talk about the history of body hair removal. And again, this is, of course, only going to be an introduction. You'll find a lot of links in the show notes on our webpage.
Many, many links.
So many links. Okay, so first of all, when human beings reach puberty, hair starts growing.
No, stop.
Period. It actually is true. It is true. Okay. And it's true for men and women, and it's true for everyone else. And specifically, hair starts growing under your armpits and in your genital areas.
Is that why teenage boys smell so gross?
Yes.
so gross.
That's the exact reason.
Yeah.
But female body hair is considered gross and unhygienic and ugly and disgusting, while male body hair is just normal, natural. Nobody cares about it. No. It's just what is happening with like grown-up bodies.
Unless maybe you're like a bodybuilder. But I mean, teenage boys aren't bodybuilders. So, but I think those are the only men I've ever seen who like wax and really get fully hairless. But they're also
I don't know many
abnormal. They're not like the norm. Not abnormal, but like they're not the norm. They're not like the, social norm.
They're not average.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, why is it that hair on women's bodies is judged so differently from hair on men's bodies? And why is it that hair is judged differently depending on where on our bodies it grows? So why is it that hair on our heads is beautiful or normal, and hair that grows on our, let's say, vulvas or armpits or legs is just completely unacceptable? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Maybe we will answer that question, maybe. Maybe you'll have ideas why that is at the end of this episode. So, should we start with, like, a personal experience, maybe?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, when I was a child, the women around me did not shave. And, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I feel like my first time I went to Europe was in the 80s, and I feel like my maybe aunts and cousins didn't shave either. And the first time and that was like late 80s. And the first time that my cousins and aunts came to the United States when I was a kid, that was the early 80s. And I feel like they didn't shave then either. And it was a really big cultural difference between the United States and Europe.
Yeah. And maybe it also depends where in Europe. Sure. I think your relatives were German.
They're German, and they're from small villages in Germany.
Exactly, yeah. And I grew up in Austria. I have a working class background. I grew up in a very small village, 300 people, in the late 80s and 90s. And shaving definitely was not a norm back then. Not at all. Because I distinctly remember that when I started high school, I was confronted with body hair shaming for the very first time. And it shocked me. And it also took me by surprise because body hair was never something I even thought about before. Mm-hmm. It was just something normal that people had,
Yeah.
And I remember that we had a female teacher that had a bit of a beard, like just a few hairs on her like face. And
it happens.
It happens to the best of us. And hairy legs. And there was one girl in her class who was in this peer group a very dominant figure. as it is in high school communities, you have cool people and not so cool people.
So was she a mean girl? Would you call her a mean girl?
Yeah, but in a very specific way, because the school that I went to was always also an artsy school.
Okay.
So she was, like, she had dreadlocks and was very cool. But then also I think she fulfilled a very similar role to what a mean girl would do.
Yeah, sure.
She didn't look like it, but she
She was like the art school equivalent of the on Wednesdays we wear pink.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah. And that girl started to make fun of that teacher, and she called her disgusting, behind her back, of course. And it kind of snowballed in this group of girls, and the teacher turned into someone that people laughed about. And the reason why they laughed about her was body hair. So that is how I learned that I need to shave to fit in.
Sure.
Because for the first time, I realized that it's something that people laugh about because it's disgusting and ugly. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, oh, fuck. I never thought about this. And then I started to shave to fit in. So I distinctly remember that I was shamed into shaving. And it's the only type of body modification, so to say, that I remember so distinctly being a direct result of shaming and sexism.
Sure. For me, I think, I did ballet and it was like, I was, you'd be a sweaty mess, but also smelly and like whatever. And so the hair was part of that. But I also remember like there were other people there and it was like a social norm and other girls and they were all shaving and, there were girls in my peer group who were shaving, but nobody really shamed me into it. Like I don't ever feel like, and possibly that's because everybody in the United States shaves, so, or waxes or whatever. It's the like non-norm in the United States to, or abnormal. Words are hard today.
Yeah.
To have underarm hair, to have leg hair. And so, I felt like, maybe people who didn't, that was odd. But again, because I had this cultural context of like seeing my family members from Germany who also didn't shave, like it was just, I thought, okay, that's something that people do. But for me, because I did ballet and, there's a certain kind of look and a certain appearance that you have to have, like it was just something that was totally normal for me to want to shave. But it was also something that like, you don't ever know how you're supposed to do that. So like my sister had to teach me how to shave, like, and I remember my sister taught me to shave my legs and she used like shaving cream, which I'd hardly ever use shaving cream to shave my legs. But it does let you know like where you have shaved. So, you don't miss spots because that's an issue. But she taught me, she taught me to like shave above the knee. And my mom was kind of appalled by that. She was like, oh, you don't need to shave above the knee. And I was like, well, what?
That's the other thing, right? So many women just shave below the knee, and I'm always like, why? What's the difference between hair that grows above the knee and below the knee? It doesn't make sense.
There's no difference. But like, I think it was like an age thing. Like at my age, my mom didn't think that I needed to shave like above the knee because maybe I wasn't, but like, I wore shorts that were above the knee. So like, why would I have like hair from the knee up? Like, it didn't make sense. Like, it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But the other problem is like once you start shaving, like you can't stop, like because the hair grows in like, thicker or whatever. And so like you're like, if you start shaving, like it's all over, kids.
Don't start.
Don't start.
Don't do drugs. Don't shave. Yeah. But for me, shaving was always something I knew that I had to do, but did not want to because it's like really related to this specific experience. I was always aware of the coercion aspect behind it and that it was never my choice,
Gotcha.
Which is very different with other, like ways of modifying my body, like makeup or whatever. Like there is this narrative behind it that I'm doing this because I feel more beautiful that way. But shaving, I always knew that it was something that I didn't want to do and just had to do.
Yeah.
So for me, it took a while until I was courageous enough or old enough to not give a fuck anymore. I don't know. To not do it anymore. And now I very rarely shave, probably once or twice a month, not a month, a year. Like I just, because I don't want to do it. Most of the time I hate it. It's irritating for my skin. I have very sensitive skin. I have all kinds of allergies. It just is so uncomfortable. And it doesn't matter whether